I was born in Ontario, Eastern Ontario, in a small village called Saint-Eugène, which was about just a few miles away from Rigaud, from the Quebec border, on a family farm. I had a wonderful childhood until the age of 8, when my dad became very ill and passed away when I was 9. And I guess I didn't realize what was happening to me at that time, but it was really a turning point as I look back. Probably set the stage for my entire destiny. So my mother was much younger than my dad. She was in her mid-30s with 4 kids, with my youngest sister still being in diapers. So she was overwhelmed and decided my older brother, who was a couple of years older than I was, should become a priest. So she sent him off to a private school in Ottawa, the Ottawa Minor Seminary. So there I was at the age of 9 or 10 with the man of the family, with a mother who was truly kind of needed help. But when I look back, it's quite amazing. At the age of 10, 11, 12, I was basically managing the family farm. And I feel today that I became an adult by the time I got to be 12 years old. As the story goes, when I was 12, my mother says, "Louis, you're going to stay with me. You're going to go to high school in Vankleek Hill, which is the town next door, and you'll run the farm. I'll give you the farm." And I thought about it. It was a tough call to make it when you're 12. And I said, no, I'd rather go and become a priest, because I wanted to get an education. I didn't articulate it that way, but I guess that was a turning point. And my mother respected that entirely. So at the age of 12, 13, I left home and joined the Ottawa Minor Seminary, which is a kind of a total transformation. Being sort of lonely on a farm and then joining a college with 300 boys, sleeping in dormitories, eating in cafeterias, playing team sports. It was a natural next step to go to Ottawa U. And again, looking back, I got a fantastic education at Ottawa U. I just wanted to study in something quite practical, so economics sounded like the right thing to do. But this was during the Vietnam War. So there's a whole bunch of draft dodgers who, from Princeton and MIT and Harvard, who just flew to Canada and became teachers, professors at Ottawa U. So I have fond memories of those years because I was kind of blessed by, very high caliber professors, which I didn't realize at the time. And it's only when I went to University of Montreal later that I realized that, hey, I had a pretty good basis. For my master's. And the reason why I went to University of Montreal, I'm drawing linkages with other events, but Mirabel Airport was a big deal. Okay, a very big deal. We don't seem to appreciate that in the early 60s, Montreal was the 3rd or 4th largest agglomeration in Canada and the United States, certainly in the northern part. After New York, Chicago, maybe LA, then Montreal, sort of halfway between Europe and, a big US market. And somebody decided we should have a humongous airport in Montreal. This was a big deal. And the person who'd come up with the justification for Mirabel was a professor called Benjamin Higgins, the teacher at University of Montreal. And I wanted to be on his courses. That was the main driver. Also, I wanted to sort of validate my education at Ottawa U by going to another university. And it was a piece of cake at the University of Montreal. So we're talking about 1973, 74. Ottawa desperately needed francophones. Okay, I had a master's in transportation economics, quite rare at the time. First master's thesis from a new research center at the University of Montreal. So they were recruiting on the spot in Montreal, and I just showed up and told them who I was, and they made an offer. And they offered me a big pile of money, like $10,000 a year. And I negotiated $10,500. I was very pleased with that. And I came to the Canadian Transport Commission at the time, which was the place to be, not Transport Canada. It's a long story, but basically all the policy development was being done at the Canadian Transport Commission, being at arm's length from government. And there was a huge research group there with about, 70, 80 researchers, and they're all the support staff and good budgets. Working with a network of universities that also were doing research in transportation. It was a big deal. So that's when I got exposed to the first study high-speed rail, the Windsor-Quebec corridor. First job. I spent many years in looking after Via Rail, rail passenger services, okay, like many, many years. And then an opportunity came to do a radical change in the way rail passenger services were offered. It was not my call, but there was kind of a first program review type of exercise where the department had to cut $300 million. And the deputy of the day decided it was going to come from one single place. And it was going to be rail passenger. Okay? And I was at the right place at the right time and the right guy, I suppose, because I knew my stuff. With a very small team, we designed all kinds of scenarios on how to cut by half, because Via Rail was getting over $600 million a year, and it was a true hemorrhage. And over a period of 6 to 9 months, with a very small team, like 3 or 4, we crafted different scenarios and came up with the $300 million. The story goes like this. The system felt that I was due for a stage in my life where I had to diversify, okay? And I was sent to PCO. I was invited to go to PCO. There was an exchange. I was still, I was in the EX3 DG. So I became director of operations, sort of the bouncer for a cabinet committee for 2 years. And it was very exciting because it validated what I had learned the hard way on how the system worked. I realized that I knew how the system worked, but I had to validate it from the inside. Found it very exciting, but at the same time very frustrating, because it was not my cup of tea to go over 10 cabinet documents every week, brief the chairman of the committee, and then flush it all out and start over again the next Monday with another batch of 10 topics. It certainly broadened my horizon, but I didn't find it very rewarding in terms of, having a true accomplishment. Yes, we locked in a decision, UP. It was not so, but I think I was doing a good job. And then an opportunity, there was an opening for an ADM policy at Transport Canada, and the clerk at the time was Justin Bourgon, and Justin Bourgon could not believe that I wanted to go back to transport. That there was a big mistake. And I said, I want to become an ADM. And she says, Louis, you will become an ADM. It's just, just give yourself a break, but this. And I said, I respect that, but I'm still going to compete. And I won. And went back to transport. My experience, which I'd like to share with others, because you can't become the victim of your own ambitions. I remember at one time getting a call, it's always on a Friday afternoon, saying, Louis, we're thinking of appointing you as associate in another department. Do you want to think about it? And I said, no, because it's in line with, I'm an economist, and it made sense to go to that other department. Say, okay, so you may share this with your wife, but nobody else, because for sure, if the rumor gets out, then for sure you won't get the job. And I said, sure. So opened a bottle of wine with my wife that evening, and that was it. But never got a call. I waited 18 months before getting the next call. And during those 18 months, a few weeks later, another person was appointed in that job of associate. And I think you have to accept that, okay? That something probably happened on that weekend and there was a better candidate for that job. And so it is, you don't control that. I still believe it's being the right person at the right place at the right time, which is why I consider myself so fortunate. Because when I was associate, a big turning point was 9/11, where as I happened to be one of the few, I was alone with the minister and a staffer when it happened, and played a very critical role on 9/11 and the days and months that followed. And Margaret Butler, the deputy at the day, was appointed to defense, and I've always assumed that because I knew what the job at hand was, that I was asked to step in, and I was totally stunned when that happened, because it's quite unusual. Okay, let's face it, it's quite unusual that somebody from the same department would come up all the way. And I was deputy for a fairly long time, the longest tenure in the last 50 years, still have the record of the longest tenure deputy of transport. September 11th, beautiful day, it's a Tuesday. I'm standing in front of Palais des Congrès in Montreal. There's a huge conference in Montreal with about 2,000 airport managers from all over North America attending this conference in Montreal. Ironically, I'm waiting for the minister to arrive because he's delivering a speech around 8:30. Minister arrives, good morning, Minister. Great speech, Louis. I'm very comfortable with it. Let me introduce you to the organizers. We walk in that huge auditorium, very dark, with the stage very high. And the minister's comfortable. We set him up. He's asked me to be in the front row. But the stage is quite high. It's at least almost 2 meters high. And I'm sitting there in the dark. The minister starts. Great speech, makes jokes, 2,000 people listening to him. And then I feel a presence next to me. I'm alone in the front row. And it's one of the organizers who says, Louis, a plane has hit an office tower. I don't know what to do. Over to you. The minister's delivering his speech. And I said, a plane has what? And he's left already. And I didn't know what to do, because the first thing that crossed my mind, it happens sometimes that a small airplane would hit a building, and yes, the pilot dies, but it happens, okay? And the first thing is, am I going to interrupt? I have no idea what the size of this accident, where it is. I don't know where it is. I don't know. Nothing. Am I going to make a fool of myself and stop the minister and interrupt this great speech? And then I sort of looked back in the room, and I could see at the back of the room already, people were standing up and sort of leaving the room. So okay, there's something major. And I couldn't get to the minister because of this physical barrier. And I took the back of my speech, and I wrote, Minister, a plane has hit a tower. Wind up your speech. Do not talk to reporters. Talk to Louis. And I handed this over to the facilitator on the stage, and he brought it to the minister. And by that time, I had managed to get around and go through security and get to the minister. But by that time, the minister already was exiting, and there was a huge crowd of reporters, Montreal reporters, already interviewing the minister about what happened. And sure enough, the minister's never missing an opportunity to talk to reporters, start to say, well, we don't know, but if it's a terrorist attack, and by that time, what you see on the screen is an arm going around the minister's shoulder and wanking him out of the screen, because that was Louis, because I didn't want my minister to expose himself and say things that he may regret. But essentially, by that time, we knew it was the World Trade Center, the first tower, and as we walked away from Palais des Congrès, somebody shouted, another plane has hit the South Tower. And it was, it was totally unexpected, and we really didn't know what was going on. What was clear is that the minister was supposed to be taken back to Dorval Airport and would fly to Toronto for another event. And as we got in that van, it was obvious that we had to drive back to Ottawa. As we drove out of Montreal, we're on the phone with the deputy minister, Margaret Bloodworth. And it was very clear that there were about 500 planes over the Atlantic. Half of them had enough fuel to be asked to turn back and go back to their point of departure. But there was another 223 aircraft that were too advanced over the Atlantic, had to be taken care of, and the Americans had closed their airspace, okay? So, needless to say, we didn't go into a long discussion about option A is to let all those aircraft dive into the ocean and have 33,000 people die, or option B, ground them at the nearest place. This was not a question of doing the right analysis. It was a question of being very decisive in a very urgent moment. And as we were driving, and the radio was on, and you kept hearing about another plane crashing on the Pentagon and a fourth plane crashing in Pennsylvania. And each time we were hearing that, the poor driver was accelerating by 10 kilometers. By the time we got to Castleman, we were flying at about 160 kilometers an hour. And I said, Robert, we got to get to Ottawa in one piece. But it's when we arrived in Ottawa and telling the driver, turn right, turn left, because he'd never been to Ottawa. And I got to my tower, and it was kind of the first moment where I could watch on television those aircraft hitting the World Trade Center in a loop, like all day. All you could see is this. And it's the first time that it hit home as how terrible this was, because we had made all those decisions without really knowing what was going on. The biggest challenge for me on 9/11 when I got back, as Margaret was taking care of the rest of the town, which is an essential job, I was trying to deal with communications. And we knew what was going on. We knew how many people had been grounded. But right or wrongly, we could not get any clearance to issue any press release. Okay? So we missed the 6 o'clock news. Everybody in the country had made public statements, including the mayor of Red Deer, like everybody. The Prime Minister had given one scrum and issued a short press release. The Governor General, all the premiers offering their condolence simply to the American people, but people didn't know what was going on, and we had all those facts. And honestly, when I look back, I really had to fight to extract authorization to actually issue a press release that gave some basic facts, which hit the 10 o'clock news and did miracles. Because then people realized that nobody got hurt. We grounded all those aircraft. People were, safely spending the night in Canada. And it really changed the situation. And I think we learned a lot from that in managing other crises, that even if you don't know, that you tell people what you know, and that there's more to come, and as we learn more, we will brief them. What I discovered in managing crises is you really leave your emotions aside. And in a sense, when you work at Transport Canada, I'm afraid to admit that you are exposed to accidents almost every day. And when I look back, there are several events that had prepared me for 9/11. 3 years before, there was the terrible accident with Swiss Air Flight 111 that dived on the shore of Nova Scotia, killing over 200 people. And the deputy was away and I was acting. And I remember managing, quote unquote, that crisis. And you learn very quickly two things. Leave your emotions aside and be resourceful. Okay. And that's another strength that I discovered I had. I discovered the hard way. Means doing your homework, knowing what you're talking about, getting results. Okay, so in the so-called leadership competencies, there's 6 competencies, but some are more equal than others. Results, for me, is number 1. If you are known to deliver results, it creates a relationship of trust with your supervisors and with your staff. They know you're determined to get results. So commitment to results. My view on this has evolved a lot. Like I used to brag about, the future belongs to subject matter experts. I think we'd be in big trouble if we just had subject matter experts. But the corollary is true as well. I think we'd be in big trouble if we didn't have subject matter experts. You need both. And what I've learned also is that there are challenges in departments where you need a generalist, and there are challenges when you need a subject matter expert. And as I said, and I'm quite conscious of the fact that I was the right person at the right time, but there might have been other circumstances where you needed a generalist. And there were times where we needed a generalist. When Justin Bourgon joined the department in the mid-70s, and over a period of 9 months, brought together ideas that had been brewing for 20 years, was able to package this and make this a unique proposal under program review. We needed a generalist to do that, so you need both. I learned everything from my mentors. It was not a mentor-mentee relationship, but it truly was. And I say that not just for the deputies that I had the privilege of working with, but also ministers. I mean, I know I'm going back, but when you work with someone like Jean-Luc Pépin, who was a teacher of political science because he went into politics. It was very inspiring. But I had the privilege of working with people like Arthur Kruger and Justin Bourgon and Margaret, and even colleagues from Morris Rosenberg, all people who, in their own way, truly inspired me. Yes, it is lonely to be a deputy minister, and largely when you decide, not sure I like the expression, but to speak truth to power. Speaking truth to power means very presumptuous. It implies you knew the truth. It's very presumptuous. But if you choose to speak truth to power, you isolate yourself. And I know colleagues are surprised when I say that I was deputy for over 7 years, and I would put my job on the line on average every 6 months. And as I say, when the pleasure's gone, the pleasure's gone. It's very capricious. So those are lonely moments, and to have the temerity or courage to do that, you have to know your stuff. You just can't go on, lightly on this. It is a fantastic place to be. Like, I am the product of the public service. All the opportunities that I had were created by the public service. One success leading to another. Just putting your head down, working hard, people eventually recognize you. It worked for me, and I had this strong bias that the public sector was far better than the private sector, but really didn't know what I was talking about. But in the last 10 years or so, I have spent time in the private sector, and I'm convinced more than ever that the public sector has so much more to offer. The subjects are more complex. It's much more difficult to get results. But once you achieve that in a complex environment, it's far more rewarding. There's the myths and realities about the vision. It's presented to you as being very linear. You're a leader, therefore you have the vision, as if this was inspired by the Holy Spirit or something. And then you mobilize people, partnerships, you're innovative, and you get results. But this thing about the vision is not something that happens instantly. Visions are developed over sometimes decades. It grows. And you cannot expect every leader to have a vision. It'd be total chaos. There has to be some growth in a vision, including carrying the vision and being the guardian of the vision when it happened. But being the guardian and the carrier of the vision is also part of being a leader.